More than 100 years ago, a shameful and deadly chapter in American military history played out in a Texas courtroom. National security correspondent David Martin reports on making amends for justice denied.
The Veterans Cemetery at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas, looks like many others. Headstones with name, rank, dates of birth and death, and wars fought.
So these all tell a story.
Until you reach this row.
Ours don't have a story. They just have name and date of death.
This is my cousin, William C. Nesbitt. Yes, sir.
Charles Anderson's cousin, Sergeant William Nesbitt, and Angela Holder's great-uncle, Corporal Jesse Moore, both memorialized only by the date, December 11th, 1917.
The first time I came here, I touched the headstone, and I said, "Oh man, this should not have happened to you, but I'm going to do something about that."
She first heard what happened to Jesse Moore from her great-aunt Lovey.
She had a photograph of him in her home, and I was a 6-year-old kid running through the house, and on this particular day, it caught my attention. And I asked my aunt, "Who is that? Why you have his picture and all?"
What were you told?
I was told that that was her brother who had been killed by the Army.
Killed in the largest mass execution in the history of the Army. 13 black soldiers convicted of mutiny and murder and hanged with no chance of appeal. 6 more hangings would follow.
My great-uncle, to think that he was standing on a trap door that was going to fall out from under him and his body weight snaps his neck, that really gets to me.
The post engineers had worked all night erecting a scaffold with a fairly unique design because it was one large single trap door for a simultaneous hanging.
John Heyman is a former soldier turned historian.
Just before sunrise, they were hanged. Once the execution was over, their bodies were each placed in plain pine coffins.
The gallows were erected on what is today the Fort Sam Houston golf course. The bodies buried a short distance away. For 20 years, their graves marked only by a number.
While they were being buried, the engineers began dismantling the scaffold. And by noon, there was no sign that there had been anything that happened.
They were members of the all-black 24th Infantry Regiment, which had served in Mexico and the Philippines.
And that's T.C. Hawkins, and that's his older brother who went into service before him.
Private First Class Thomas Coleman Hawkins was Jason Holt's great-uncle.
This is T.C. Hawkins, and that's a friend of his. The bravado that's associated with being a military man, you can see it's in full effect right there in that picture.
Yeah. Was he proud of being in the Army?
He was. In 1917, one of the things that you could do to make your family proud and to make your community proud was to join the Army.
After America entered World War I, troops from the 24th Infantry were sent to Houston to guard a training camp for soldiers being sent to the front in Europe.
I feel as though they should have never been sent there to begin with.
Never been sent to Houston?
Yes, sir.
Why?
Jim Crow and racism.
There's a phrase that I came across doing my research that Houston could be called Jim Crow's hometown.
Wearing the uniform doesn't give a black soldier any immunity from Jim Crow?
Not in the least, especially not in Texas.
They would never call them soldiers. They would always call them the N-word.
A series of run-ins with white police and a false rumor that the black soldiers were about to be attacked set off a race riot.
All of a sudden, someone shouted, "Get your guns, boys, there's a mob coming." And instantly, pandemonium breaks out.
And this was the first race riot in which you had more white people than black people killed.
The soldiers of the 24th were placed under arrest and marched out of town. When T.C. Hawkins' mother asked the Army about her son, the reply said only he was present serving with his organization.
They don't mention any of the things that happened. They don't mention that he's about to be on trial.
About to be on trial for his life.
For a capital crime.
The first and largest of 3 courts-martial was held here. 63 soldiers charged with mutiny and murder.
63 men is the largest murder trial, not only in the U.S. Army's history, it's the largest murder trial in American history.
Those who would decide the case were all white. That man sitting by himself, Major Harry Greer, was the lone defense counsel, and he was not even an attorney.
If you say that one person who's not even a lawyer defended 63 people at one time, on its face, it's a miscarriage of justice.
He was allowed only 10 days to prepare his case for the defense.
13 were condemned to death, but the commanding general, John Ruckman, kept that verdict secret from them until 12 hours before their execution. When this letter reaches you,
I will be beyond the veil of sorrow.
that night, T.C. Hawkins wrote his family a final letter, which has been passed down through the generations.
I was sentenced to be hanged for the trouble that took place in Houston, Texas, although I am not guilty of the crime that I am accused. One day, a box showed up at the house, and in the box were his personal effects, the charge sheet, and his last letter. That's how the family found out.
Angela Holder and Charles Anderson finally got a chance last month to see the room where their ancestors waited for the hangman.
And they were all in here.
Yeah, 13.
I can only imagine.
13 condemned men.
Yes.
To be brought up out of a hole like this in the basement.
This space, this is all you got. And the next small space is your grave, your coffin. But there were soldiers to the end. They didn't bend, they didn't cry.
Dramatized in the television show Roots, The Next Generations.
Way down in Egypt's land, tell
They would have preferred the firing squad over hanging.
Because?
It's more dignified.
So they wouldn't even give them that?
No.
Dignity denied in death became a lifelong cause for Charles Anderson, Angela Holder, and Jason Holt.
So when did the idea of overturning the convictions become the goal?
Well, it was always the goal.
More than a century after the trials, the Army took up the case.
We reviewed the entire record for all 110 soldiers that were initially court-martialed and made the determination that all 110 should be overturned.
Undersecretary of the Army Gabe Camarillo says a case-by-case review found that none of the defendants had received a fair trial.
Very few witnesses were called. There was very little opportunity for cross-examination.
Was race the deciding factor here?
I think race was very much a factor, both in the circumstances leading to the events of August of 1917 and certainly in the conduct of the trial.
Even by the Jim Crow standards of 1917, justice had been denied.
Those first 13 individuals that were convicted and executed did not even receive the opportunity to appeal or review their case.
What about all the other soldiers who were convicted but not sentenced to death? What happened to them?
Many of them continued to serve prison sentences. Some died while they were serving prison sentences.
Can the Army really right a wrong like this?
It's never too late to correct an injustice.
Private Joseph Williams, Jr., Private David Wilson, Private Ernest Wilson.
In a ceremony at the Buffalo Soldiers National Museum in Houston, all the wrongly convicted soldiers of the 24th Infantry were given honorable discharges.
Good morning, everyone.
Angela Holder and Jason Holt were there.
What price are you willing to pay to hold on to your honor?
When our mother received the box with Jesse's coat, Bible, goodbye letter, and $1, it devastated her.
And new headstones engraved for the men who were hanged.
We'll have information on these headstones that reflect the service that they rendered to their country, just like the rest of the stones here.
When that happens, when they get a proper headstone, will you feel like this is over?
Yes, I have some completion, some peace.
We ask for forgiveness to our nation and to our Army. We're thankful for a nation that can change, that can adjust, and make amends.
This past Thursday at Fort Sam Houston, Angela Holder stood watch as proper headstones for her great uncle and the other unjustly executed soldiers were unveiled. Now their story is told.